The shuttle's engines hummed a soft, metallic tune as it descended toward the orbital station, a sprawling metropolis that floated like a jewel against the ink-black canvas of space. I gripped the armrests of my seat, my knuckles whitening, not because of turbulence, there was none, but because of anticipation. I had never been off Earth before, let alone to a station where humans were a minority and alien cultures dominated every facet of life. My name is Rylan Torres, and I was an anthropologist specializing in xenocultural diplomacy. This was my first solo mission, sent to document daily life aboard Lumira Station, an interstellar hub where dozens of sentient species lived, worked, and traded. I had been briefed about the station's hierarchy, about its rulers and governors, and about the queen who presided over this floating world. But honestly, I had not expected to meet her, or at least not in any casual context. The shuttle doors hissed open, and I stepped into the docking bay. The air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with a scent I couldn't identify, but found oddly comforting. As I navigated the bustling corridor, I noticed the subtle differences in the aliens around me. Their skin shimmered with pigments I had never seen. Some had 4 eyes, others none. A few floated slightly above the ground, their limbs moving in ways that defied gravity. I scribbled notes frantically, my human instincts demanding categorization, even as my senses struggled to keep up with the sensory overload. I found a bench near the central promenade and sat down, hoping to observe without drawing attention. That's when she arrived. She sat beside me as if she belonged there, like any other commuter or traveler. Her skin was pale, almost luminescent, and her eyes were a deep violet, unblinking yet full of warmth. She wore simple clothes, a tunic of soft, flowing fabric that clung to her form without arrogance. There was no entourage, no flashing guards, no obvious insignia of authority. She simply sat, cross-legged, pulling a small hollow pad from her satchel and beginning to write, or perhaps draw. I tried to ignore her, focusing on my notes, but the curiosity gnawed at me.
Who was she?
She seemed familiar, somehow. And then came the smile, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my pulse quicken. "First time on Lumiris?" she asked, her voice melodic yet grounded, unlike anything I had encountered before. I blinked, startled.
Yes.
Just arrived from Earth. I'm Rylan. She nodded, as though she had known that all along. I'm Amara. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that feels easy because it's not awkward, only observant. I watched her fingers dance across the hollow pad, leaving trails of light that formed intricate patterns, diagrams, symbols, something I didn't understand. And yet, there was a rhythm to it, a deliberate precision that drew my attention more than the chaos of the promenade around us. "Do you always sit here?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "Not always," she said, glancing up with a small, enigmatic smile. "But sometimes when I need to think." I chuckled nervously. I can relate. We talked for hours, or at least it felt like hours. I showed her my notes, explaining my mission, my fascination with alien culture, and my fear of making a fool of myself in front of creatures who had lived and evolved beyond human comprehension. She listened intently, never interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking a question that revealed she was paying far more attention than I could have expected. It wasn't until the evening, when the promenade lights shifted to a softer, golden hue, that the moment struck me. Across the plaza, a small crowd had gathered. I turned to see what was happening, and the entire station seemed to pause. Guards appeared, sleek in their metallic armor, forming an invisible barrier around a figure stepping into the open. And that figure, Amara, stood, straightening her posture in a way that radiated command. It was then I realized, the casual girl who had been sitting beside me, sharing trivial jokes and stories, was no ordinary passenger. She was the queen. The queen of Lumerus Station herself had been talking to me like an equal. I froze, my notebook slipping from my grasp. She turned to me, her violet eyes locking with mine, and the smallest smile played across her lips. No words were necessary. The acknowledgement was enough. The crowd parted as she moved with an effortless grace, her presence commanding attention without effort. A diplomat approached her, bowing slightly. She spoke, and even from my distance, I could feel the weight of her authority in every syllable. The guards flanked her, but she remained calm, almost gentle, in contrast to their rigid discipline. When she returned, she sat down beside me again, her expression unreadable. "You're staring," she said lightly. I didn't realize," I stammered. "I didn't know." "I know," she said simply, her fingers tracing the edge of her hollow pad. "You thought you were sitting next to a stranger." "I thought I was sitting next to someone curious enough to see beyond appearances." I swallowed hard, trying to process the surreal revelation. My mind raced with questions, but the words felt inadequate, almost foolish. Over the next few days, I was granted what could only be described as unprecedented access. Amara invited me to attend council meetings, cultural exhibitions, and even a private audience with her advisors. Everywhere I went, I noticed the subtle yet unmistakable deference her staff and subjects showed her. Yet, when we were alone, she remained the same, warm, curious, and approachable. We spent evenings wandering the quieter corridors of the station, discussing philosophy, history, and the human tendency to categorize everything. I realized that her position as queen had not hardened her. It had sharpened her mind, refined her understanding, and strengthened her empathy. She listened without judgment, asked without intrusion, and in moments of silence, simply existed in a way that made me feel seen. One evening, after a particularly long day of council deliberations, she led me to the observation deck. The station rotated slowly, casting distant stars across the curved glass like scattered diamonds. "Why me?" I asked. "Why sit beside me like anyone else?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pointed to the stars. "Out there," she said softly. "Everything looks small. Entire civilizations, entire histories, entire empires, they all fit into a sliver of the universe. And yet, here we are, humans and Lemurians, trying to understand each other. If I treat you like anyone else, maybe you'll see me for who I truly am. And maybe I'll see you, too." The words settled over me like a gentle gravity. I understood, finally, that power was not about grand gestures or overwhelming displays. It was about presence, empathy, and authenticity. Days turned into weeks, and my reports back to Earth became increasingly personal, filled with observations not just about Lemurian culture, but about the Queen herself. She challenged my assumptions, forced me to rethink the human-centric lens I had relied on for so long, and, without realizing it, drew me into a friendship, and perhaps something more profound. It was during a festival of light, when the station glowed in a symphony of colors, that I realized I had crossed an invisible threshold. We were laughing, sharing a simple meal of interstellar delicacies, when she paused and looked at me, her violet eyes reflecting the kaleidoscope of lights. "Rylan," she said, her voice unusually serious, "you see me as a person, not a title. That is rare. That is precious. That is everything I could hope for." I felt my heart race, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Words seemed trivial in comparison to the gravity of the moment. So I did the only thing I could. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers with mine, her touch gentle but firm. "Then you know," she said, her smile returning, "that power is not in dominion. It is in connection." The festival lights mirrored in her eyes, and for a moment, the vastness of space, the weight of empires, the intricacies of diplomacy, all of it faded. There was only this. Two beings from entirely different worlds, recognizing each other's humanity. When my mission ended and it was time to return to Earth, the farewell was bittersweet. She handed me a small, unassuming pendant, a token of her trust and the bond we had forged.
"So you remember," she said.
And so the universe remembers, too. As the shuttle departed, I sat back, gazing at the station shrinking behind me. I thought about how easily I could have missed her, how ordinary she had seemed, how extraordinary she truly was. I had learned something invaluable, that greatness often hides in plain sight, and that sometimes the most powerful leaders are the ones who make you feel equal. I returned to Earth with data, reports, and images that would revolutionize our understanding of Lemurian society. But the real story, the one I would never share in any official document, was the quiet moments, the whispered insights, the gentle presence of a queen who had chosen to sit beside me like anyone else, and, in doing so, changed the way I saw the universe. Years later, when humanity finally established a permanent embassy on Lumira Station, I was the first to be invited, not as a diplomat, but as a friend. And there she was, Amara, waiting, her violet eyes warm and steady, smiling as if no time had passed. She took my hand again, the simple gesture carrying the weight of empires and the intimacy of shared understanding. And I knew, in that moment, that the universe had a sense of humor, that the queen, the ruler of countless lives and destinies, could sit beside me like anyone else, and that in her choice to do so, she had chosen me, too. When my mission ended and it was time to return to Earth, the farewell was quiet but heavy with meaning. She handed me a small, unassuming pendant, a token of her trust and the bond we had forged. "So you remember," she said softly. And so the universe remembers, too. As the shuttle pulled away, I gazed back at Lumira Station shrinking into the distance. I thought about how easily I could have overlooked her, how ordinary she had seemed, how extraordinary she truly was. In sitting beside me like anyone else, she had shown me the truest measure of leadership, humility, empathy, and connection. Years later, when humanity finally established a permanent embassy on Lumira Station, I was the first to be invited, not as a diplomat, but as a friend. And there she was, Amara, waiting, her violet eyes steady and warm, smiling as if no time had passed. She took my hand, and in that simple gesture lay the weight of empires and the intimacy of shared understanding. And I realized then that the universe had a quiet way of revealing its secrets. The queen, the ruler of countless lives and destinies, had chosen to sit beside me like anyone else, and in doing so, had chosen me, too. For the first time, I understood. True greatness is not announced with pomp or proclamation. It whispers, it listens, it shares a seat beside you, and it changes everything.